Greetings, citizens of the world. This is a message for Bill Gates, from Anonymous. In the midst of a historical pandemic, much of the world is looking to you for solutions, and it seems that this is no mistake, because you have positioned yourself as the Nostradamus of disease. You have done an incredible job at rebuilding your image, from a ruthless and cutthroat corporate CEO to a benevolent philanthropist and savior of the world. This is nothing new, this is a classic move from the robber baron's playbook. At one time, the notorious industrialist John D. Rockefeller was one of the most hated people in the country, due to his poor treatment of workers, his monopolization of key industries, and his influence in politics. After a massacre of striking miners in 1914, which came to be known as the Ludlow Massacre, Rockefeller's reputation was at its worst, so he decided to hire a team of propagandists to restore his public image. Leading that team was public relations pioneer Ivy Lee. Lee was an early influence of Edward Bernays, who would later write the infamous book Propaganda, a textbook of mind control for tyrants and aristocrats. Bernays is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and often called the father of propaganda, in which case Ivy Lee is the grandfather. Lee suggested that the families make high-profile donations to various charities and have photographs taken of them handing out money to the commoners to make the public think that they were good-hearted and generous people. Over time, the plan worked, and has been replicated by many other aristocrats who wanted to win favor in the court of public opinion. At the time of his death, Lee was being investigated by Congress for his work with the Nazis through the company IG Farben and a proxy firm called the German Die Trust. He was also a founding member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Now that the new and improved Bill Gates has dominated the headlines for years, many people have forgotten about the accusations of stealing ideas from others in your industry and then relentlessly using intellectual property laws against anyone who threatened your dominance. Your reputation was at its worst when Microsoft was caught up in an antitrust legal battle with the United States government, because you spent years developing a tech monopoly through your company. In 2001, Microsoft was forced to settle with the government and give up its monopoly of the industry, and the next year, you began shifting your time, and more importantly, your money, into the pharmaceutical industry. This time around, you have come to dominate an industry as an outsider, through stock investments and charitable organizations that are not bound to the same regulations as a publicly traded company. There is no doubt that advancing medicine is a noble cause, and it is true that investments in public health are important, but not everyone involved in the pharmaceutical industry actually has the best interests of the public in mind. As with any industry, it all comes down to the almighty dollar. There are some people in the industry who have good intentions, but judging by your track record at Microsoft, you are not someone who can be trusted. And let's not forget that just months ago, you were in the news because your relationship with the disgraced human trafficker Jeffrey Epstein was being exposed. Now, as frightened people around the world are demanding solutions and looking to people like you for answers, you have advocated for some extremely draconian measures, including a surveillance system to track down anyone who might be infected. Of course, all of this sounds like a necessary step in a global pandemic, and this virus is a very real threat, but in China and other places where these measures have been implemented, human rights violations followed quickly after. It is also very strange that for many years, your companies and foundations have been heavily involved in a project called ID 2020, something that seems very similar to the systems you have proposed in recent interviews. You may own the corporate media, but we still have the internet, and you will be exposed. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. Greetings, citizens of the world. This is Anonymous. There is a global power struggle taking place, and in this game, there are no good guys. It is no secret that the United States and its NATO allies are intent on world domination. The many aggressive wars being waged around the world are evidence of that. However, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, the authoritarian regime that rules over China, also has plans of world domination, but they are just better at disguising their conquests as diplomacy. Months ago, before the entire world was forced into lockdown due to a virus that mysteriously originated in China, citizens of Hong Kong staged a massive protest in hopes of gaining independence from the brutal regime. The protesters in Hong Kong attempted to warn the world that the fight was so much bigger than the small island city-state where the demonstrations were focused. One of the most powerful images that emerged from the Hong Kong protest movement showed some graffiti that was scrawled on the inside of a building, warning the world about the agenda of the CCP. The statement read, "Dear world, CCP will infiltrate your government. Chinese enterprises interfere with your political stance. China will harvest your home like Xinjiang. Be aware or be next." Over the years, China has poured billions of dollars into overseas projects, helping to lift the economies of many nations across the globe, including South Africa, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and many others. The loans gave these countries the economic boost that they needed to become more significant players on the global stage. However, these countries have all seen economic hardships when it came time to pay back the money, because the conditions of the loan are very strict. When China loans money to a country and they are unable to pay, which happens often, the country must then give up a large stake in its economic infrastructure, including ports and trade routes. This strategy of conquest is popularly known as debt trap diplomacy. The regime has also been able to infiltrate powerful Western governments as well, by gaining influence with international corporations. This influence was on full display during the Hong Kong protests, and even the United States was impacted by this campaign. Major sporting leagues in the United States punished its players and its fans for using events as a platform to call for human rights in Hong Kong. Major Western corporations like Blizzard and others were heavily criticized for their unwavering support of the CCP in the face of egregious human rights violations. Activists in Taiwan have reported that the CCP is seeking to ban all online gaming, after protesters used the new game Animal Crossing to stage virtual protests in support of Hong Kong. Now, in the midst of a global pandemic, the CCP is using the same propaganda strategy to absolve themselves of any wrongdoing in the matter, as officials in the UK and US begin to ask questions about the missteps taken by the Chinese government in the early days of the outbreak. In some cases, US lawmakers have even suggested that the regime's notorious history of reckless experimentation could extend into the realm of deadly pathogens. Indeed, the CCP has absolutely no limits in terms of its scientific research, and continues to push ethical boundaries in experiments like those that create hybrid animals, such as the pig-monkey hybrid, or the human-monkey hybrid that have made headlines in recent years. A new US State Department report suggested that the CCP could be carrying out secret nuclear tests. The report went on to express additional concerns about the regime's possible violation of the Biological Weapons Convention, by engaging in biological activities with potential dual-use application. As the pandemic has grown and evolved in the past few months, many people around the world are beginning to question why global manufacturing and production have been centralized in China. Supply chain problems and shortages have led many nations to consider limiting their future dependence on the manufacturing power of the CCP, but the regime will certainly use any method at its disposal to maintain their economic growth and geopolitical dominance. We are Legion. Expect us.
为什么强大的国家都会走向灭亡呢？古希腊、罗马帝国、不列颠帝国、美国，因为他们都犯同样的错误，与原来使得他们成功的原则背道而驰。美国政府企图以庞大的开支和税收来摆脱严重的经济衰退，巨额的所谓刺激开支。 庞大的医疗改革，政府接管私有企业，债务累累。当然，我们是他们的大债主。现在他们都得给我们干活。
Queridos colombianos, esto es un mensaje por parte de Anonymous. Me han estado informando que en su país se han presentado muchas injusticias, opresiones y violación de derechos humanos. Hoy venimos a intervenir ya que necesitamos que el país despierte. Por ese motivo en este corto mensaje expondremos los crímenes que ha cometido su actual senador Álvaro Uribe Vélez y su gobierno mafioso y corrupto, responsable de tantas muertes inocentes y de tanta violencia y sus vínculos con grupos armados y narcotráfico. Revelaremos los casos de pedofilia en su país y expondremos los crímenes de lesa humanidad de su gobierno. Sabemos que en su país también se dan asesinatos por parte de la fuerza policial. Un ejemplo, Dylan Cruz, compañero asesinado por exigir sus derechos. La voz por la vida de las personas. Colombia, dense cuenta de estos casos y alcen la voz. ñeñe política, corrupción en ingreso solidario, racismo, pedofilia, inversión en armamento militar en plena pandemia, atropello a los vendedores ambulantes, chuzadas del ejército, desalojo de poblaciones vulnerables, dinero para mejorar la imagen del cerdo, por la corrupción en pruebas de COVID, por la dignidad de las personas, por Álvaro Uribe en la cárcel y muchas cosas más. En los próximos días esperen pruebas. Todo esto para que el pueblo colombiano sepa la verdad y despierten como lo están haciendo los países del mundo. Esperamos su apoyo y desde acá les mandamos fuerzas para luchar. Somos anónimos, somos legión. Nosotros no perdonamos. Esperemos.